Down and down sank Beowulf into the cold, swinging depths, down and down for what seemed the whole of a day. From all sides the tusked sea beast rushed upon him, striving to gore him to pieces, and ever as he sank he fought them off with stroke and lunge of the great sword, grunting. At last his feet touched the sea-floor, and instantly an enemy far more dire was upon him, as the sea-hag leapt to fling her arms about him, clutching him to her with claws as terrible as her son's had been. He was being rushed through the black depths, close locked in her dreadful embrace, and now, still together, they were diving upward through the underwater mouth of a cave. Up and up. They were in a vast sea-hall above the tide line, white sand underfoot, the faint light of day falling in shafts from some opening to the cliff-top far above. Beowulf tore himself free, and springing clear for a sword-stroke, brought Hrunting whistling down on her head. The cave rang with the blow, but for the first time it was forged. The blade refused to bite, and the next instant she was upon him once more. He stumbled beneath her onslaught, and she flung him down with herself on top of him, stabbing again and again at his breast with her broad-bladed dagger. And when that failed to pierce his battle-sark, clawing and whirring at him as though she were a wolf indeed, he saw her fangs sharp behind her snarling lips, and her eyes shone with balefire amid the tangle of her hair. But the ringed mail of the queen's gift withstood her still, and gathering his strength he flung her off a second time, and springing up aimed at her a blow that should have swept her head from her shoulders. Again her charmed hide turned the stroke, and with a cry he flung the useless weapon aside. "Come then, my naked hand shall serve me, as they served me in the hall of Hrothgar," and he sprang to meet her attack. There, on the silver sand, with the roar of the sea echoing about them, hollow like the echo in a vast shell, he with one arm locked about her and the other straining at her dagger wrist, she striving always with fang and claw to come at his heart. They reeled and trampled to and fro, as 2 nights since he had reeled and trampled to and fro with Grendel in the darkened hall of Heorot. Long and bitter was the struggle, but there was a strength in the sea-hag that had not been in her son, and Beowulf could not overcome it. Some weapon he must have, and as he fought he snatched desperate glances about him in search of one. Here and there ancient weapons hung on the rock walls of the cavern, and among them the light from the roof fell upon one sword, a huge sword, dwarf-wrought perhaps for giants in the far-past days, for it was so long in the blade and broad in the grip that no mortal man save Beowulf could have wielded it. Seeing it, his heart leapt up with fresh hope, and gathering all his strength and cunning, he gave way before the sea-hag's onslaught, then swerved and sprang sideways past her, to snatch it from the wall. His hand closed over the hilt, and with a triumphant battle shout he whirled around and brought the blade down upon her in a flashing swoop of fire. It shored through hair and hide and bone, and Grendel's dam dropped without a sound, her hideous head all but smitten from its shoulders. Beowulf stood still, panting from his struggle, and looked about him, while the magic blade dripped red in his hand. Far off at the water's edge, the light from the upper world showed him the gigantic body of Grendel lying outstretched, dead, and he strode towards it across the stained and trampled sand. Here at last, it seemed, he had a blade that could pierce the flesh of Grendel and his kin, and raising it once more with a mighty effort, he smote loathsome head and loathsome body asunder. Blood streamed out into the water in a murky crimson flood that the sea sucked under and out through the mouth of the cave. And as Beowulf stood gazing down at the dead monster, the thick dark blood dripping along the blade ate into it and melted it away like ice in the warmth of a fire, until nothing was left but the wondrous gold-wrought hilt in his hand. Then Beowulf stooped and twisted his free hand in the snaky hair of the severed head, and with the sword hilt still in the other, dived down to the cave mouth and triumphantly up through the water, which was now clear and bright, up and up towards the daylight far above him. Meanwhile, the Geats and Danes had waited all the long-drawn day, watching from the deserted walrus rocks, and as the sun began to wester, they beheld a great gout of blood that came bursting up from the depths, as though the sea-hole itself were vomiting blood. They crowded to the brink, staring downward with eyes that strained in their heads, but it was a sight to shake the boldest heart, and as the moments lengthened and brought no sign of Beowulf, the hope that they had clung to all day dwindled and grew thin like the red stain washing seaward on the waves. At last Hrothgar stirred with a heavy sigh. "It is over then, and we shall not see him again, Beowulf, who was a son to me." And he turned away to the rocky gloom under the trees where the stream came down. "Come, there is naught to be gained by biding longer in this place." And sadly, like warriors straggling back from defeat, his thanes followed him as he set his face to the long upward climb. But Beowulf's Geats remained, almost as empty of hope as those who followed Hrothgar, but faithful to their lord, who had bidden them wait for him. And hardly had the wave roar engulfed the last sounds of the departing Danes, than Wegmund said, "Look, look, the creatures are all making out to sea. It is as though they fled for their lives." And another of the little band took up his cry, "Look, look at the water, it is clean and clear." And as they slithered and stumbled forward to the outermost edges of the weed-slippery rocks, shouting to each other while the great walruses swam away, they saw far down through the water that was clear now as green crystal, the longed-for shape of Beowulf springing up towards them. Eager arms reached down to aid him ashore as he broke surface, scattering the white foam from his shoulders, and then he was among them, stretched, spent, upon the rocks, drawing the free air into himself in great gasps like a runner at the end of a hard-won race, while they thronged about him to loosen off his helmet and stare with awe and wonder at the blind, snarling head that he had flung down beside him, and the huge bladeless sword hilt he still clutched in his hand. "Oh, it is good to see your faces again, my brothers," said Beowulf as soon as he could speak, and then, looking about him, "But where are Hrothgar and his thanes? Did they find the waiting over long?" "They saw a wave of blood that boiled up from below," said Wegemund, kneeling beside him, "and their hearts told them there was nothing more to wait for. That was the blood of the sea hag, and Grendel's blood that gushed out when I smote his head from his body lying dead down there," Beowulf said. "And you? Did you not also see the blood wave?" "Aye, we saw it." "But your hearts did not bid you lose hope?" Wegmund bent his head. As to hope, there was little enough of that left to us, but we were still your war-boat's crew, your shoulder-to-shoulder men. "And so you stayed," Beowulf said, and suddenly he laughed on a note that was like the song of victorious war horns, and sprang up, holding out his arms to them. "And that is well, for see, it will take 4 spears at the least to carry the monster's head back to Heorot." And so, with Grendel's head upreared on 4 spear points in their midst, they turned to the gorge that led up towards the high moors, and leaving the sea-hole cleansed of evil behind them, set out on their triumphant way back to the settlement.